podcast is a member of WildGamesProductions.com and D20Radio.com.
Between the time when wargamers played with chainmail and the rise of the wizards of the coast, there was an age of gamers. And unto this, Gygax, destined to bear the crown jewel of TSR upon a troubled brow, to show you all how to roll for initiative.
The Roll for Initiative podcast, issue number 79. I'm DM Vince, sitting alongside DM Matt.
Hello, everyone.
And DM Will.
Hey there.
And Nick is still not here. Sure, he's going to be sad after he hears the special insert we just recorded, but what are we going to do? The man had other things to do with his family that's more important than games. Right, guys?
Yeah, that family is important.
Right.
That it is, especially when they surprise you with parties.
Yes, exactly.
I thought he was looking for Easter eggs.
No, he's not looking for Easter eggs.
I thought that was what it was. Oh, Lord.
All right, so let's head right into our sage advice this week.
Master! They're at the gates again! Master! It looks like another band of adventurers!
Adventurers again? Always the same. Coming to me for sage advice.
Sage advice this week, rfistaff@gmail.com. We actually have two emails this week. The first one comes from Sheldon, not from the Big Bang Theory. And he actually says, thank you, Will, for returning to the show. And he also wants to know, how do you deal with characters who don't show up to games? I've tried to deal with these PCs who don't show up in a number of ways, such as ignoring their existence for a session, acting like nothing happened, but I feel like I'm cheating the rest of the party. On one occasion, there was a TPK, which could have potentially been averted if the missing player was there. I just don't feel right letting my players, who can be a little rascals, take control of missing person's character, but I also don't like playing the PC myself for a session, as it takes out of the immersion. Please help. Love, Sheldon.
I love Sheldon, huh?
Yeah, love Sheldon, it says.
Well, Sheldon, thank you very much. I am back, and I'm going to stay here. This is funny. This is a very good question, and I'm seeing this occur a lot, and not in first edition groups, but I'm seeing this a lot in the Pathfinder groups, because the minimum amount of players is 4 people. If a player becomes sick, or if something happens and he can't make it, what are the options? Well, there's 2 options. Suspend playing that game for that day or weekend and play board games. Or 2, you could always have an alternate adventure with alternate player characters and play that game, until the other player comes back the next week. That's what I look at. That's what I recommend.
I've done, like, the NPC's just not there. Do the thing like how you said, ignore.
Right.
And, if you're not there, you can't be there. Life happens. What are you going to do? And so I've done the whole thing, like, what do they call autopilot NPC? And then I also let other players take over for the character. But when you do, like he said, his group's little rascals. You have to say every time the DM suspects something stupid that you're doing, like, haha, we'll throw him in like Nodwick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, really, would Jim do that with his character? Would he just run into there and stupidly do that? No. He would not do that. You have to think, like, and you penalize the player if they actually take another player and purposely try to kill them.
Right.
You take control while, they don't have to be a role-playing character. It could be an NPC character just floating around, but you got to trust someone in your group eventually.
Yeah, it's for me. I never let another player play another player's character. That's just, I wouldn't even consider it, because half the time we don't even have the character sheets. Each individual player will keep their own character sheet and bring it every week, so that wouldn't even be an option. And what I usually do is just come up with a valid reason why this character is not with the group for this session. Like when I ran my Star Wars game, the Wookiee wasn't there one day. So he ran off for Life Day. Oh, he had Life Day to attend to. Or one time the pilot couldn't make it. He had some bad food and spent the entire session in the bathroom on his ship. I mean, they're silly little things, but
4 minutes.
Yes, exactly. Especially when the rest of the party needed to get off of the planet really quickly, and he had locked the door of the ship, the cockpit door, and they couldn't get in. So they decided to bust down the cockpit door because he wouldn't come out of the bathroom. But I usually just try to find a plausible reason for that character not to be a part of the party, and then just continue on with the session, and then at that point it's on the characters to know we're down a man, we better act accordingly. So if a TPK happens because, they're undermanned, but the players are just getting in way over their head when they should know better, that's on the players. They got themselves killed, while their other buddy, who is not part of the TPK, because in my game he would be off doing something else, can actually next session come back and try to save them or resurrect them or whatever. So,
and see, that's the key thing right there, too, just like you said. It also depends on which party member is gone. I mean, if your only fighter is gone, you got a problem. If your only cleric or only thief is gone, you got a problem.
Right. Yeah. But it just comes down to if you have like duplicates of a class, like if you have 2 thieves, 2 clerics, 2 fighters, losing one of them isn't the end of the world. You don't completely lose balance. But I'm not one to really stop the game unless we're at a pivotal point where not having all players there would hurt, or if what's coming up focuses on that player that will not be there. Then it's time to bust out the board games or one-shot something else. It's like my group, we like one-shotting Top Secret SI. That's yeah. For us, that's just okay, we got this little mission we need to go in, break into this office building, steal these files, get out. We can easily do that in one game session. We have our fun with it. And we even keep characters from our one-shot session to one-shot session. So
yeah, that's a good idea. Have them ready to go. Just pull them out. Okay, guys, pull out the... we used to do that a lot with... when D&D, we didn't have enough players. We would pull out Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and play that for one night.
Right.
There you go. See, yeah.
I love that game.
Yeah, some games are just better suited for one-shots than they are campaigns, and those are great games to bust out on those situations.
If you have a really goofy night, pull out Toon.
Yeah.
Wow, I haven't heard that in a long time.
Yeah, if you just want a goofy night... You know what's the funniest thing? Watching players from the later edition play Toon. Like 4E players or 3.5 players, just because they don't grasp the concept of you can do whatever you want. I mean, I'm not saying it's every player like that, but just a majority of them I've play Toon. I'm like, what do you do? They're just like, like, you're a cartoon character. What do you do? Come on, you're a cartoon character. What do you do? Think Bugs Bunny. It's like, come on, you pull a hammer out of your butt. Come on, do something.
Yeah. Wile E. Coyote, you know what I'm saying? Roadrunner, you know?
Some of them just don't grasp the idea of free-form RPG like that, but, it's fun.
Yeah.
Okay, next letter. Thank you, Sheldon, by the way. Next letter comes from T.C. Walker. I haven't listened to all the episodes yet, so you may not have already covered this. I think it'd be awesome if you guys did a show on how to convert stats and abilities from other editions of D&D, say from 4E to 1 or 3E to 1 or 0 to 1 or 2 to 1. Maybe some other related systems like Castles and Crusades or maybe even Pathfinder could be covered too. Oftentimes I find a cool looking module or a splat book from some other non-1E system and I want to get it, but I don't know how to do all the conversions since I don't have enough experience in 1E or the system in question. Keep up the good work, TC. I think we'll do that next show, actually. What do you think, guys?
Yeah. Yeah, because there's quite a few like interesting monsters that are specific to Pathfinder or to the various other games that it would be interesting to bring them in. And for the people that may have a lot of the old 2E monstrous compendiums, just what are the little tweaks you have to do to those monsters to make them work in first? Because I know, like me and Jen talked in the special issue, we started with that hybrid first, second, because we came into that weird transition period when we first started gaming. So Like, I was using a first edition DMG with second edition monsters, and there's little differences between the monsters. There's not quite as easily pulling one into the other as it would first appear. Just
Really?
Mostly just because of the difference between THAC0 and first and second. I think that's the big difference.
Yeah, THAC0 is a bit off from first edition because it doesn't have the repeating 20s and things like that. But
right. I think
once you get past the 4 or 5th level, it doesn't do that anymore.
Yeah. But most players, when they start, they're going to be starting at the lower levels. That I think you're going to see that more. But, I mean, again, it's nothing major. It's just there's just little differences that I think it might be interesting to point out.
Well, what do you think?
Oh, I can tell you right now, I do tons of conversion. And, doing all those reviews for Die Hard Game Fan and looking at all the supplemental materials out there. I mean, I have bought so much stuff over the past 33, 34 years. And, it would be a waste not to say this is only exclusive for one edition. How can I convert this over to first edition? I can tell you the simple way. A goblin in first edition is a goblin in second, third, and fourth, regardless. That's the easy things.
Yeah.
Now, when you start doing with the aberrations, and I tell you, I am an absolute fan of giving monsters classes. And that's what a lot of monsters have in those other editions like 3.5, Pathfinder, and so on. They're still a goblin, but now they're a goblin warrior or a goblin magic user or a goblin cleric. I mean, conversion is very easy. Simplifying it, no problem. Take what you like, get rid of the rest you don't need.
Yeah, I've never had a problem converting something from Pathfinder to 1E.
Yeah.
Or second edition or third, even. I guess because I have experience in them, it's probably easier for me as opposed to someone who has no experience in it.
Right.
I just would find, like Will said, find the monster. Say it's a skeleton warrior. You're like, okay, it's a skeleton warrior. Let me look in 1E and see what I can find the closest thing to skeleton warrior. Okay, skeleton. Let's just beef up the skeleton just a little bit, and there's my monster.
Right. And the funniest thing about it is, though, there's nothing wrong with giving monsters like, skeletons are primaries, and I'm glad you use that. That's excellent, is that skeletons might have some type of damage resistance because of their hardness or their brittleness. I don't know, depending on what kind of weapon you use. We already know that if you try to attack a skeleton with an edged weapon, you're going to do half damage. Well, guess what? That's damage resistance. In Pathfinder, it's damage resistance 5 blunt. What that means is if you use any kind of weapon besides an edged weapon, or besides a blunt weapon, 5 points that damage is negligible. So, I mean, it is compatible. You just have to go through all the word twisting and everything. It's the same thing.
Yes.
It's the same thing over. Yeah, no, excellent. I think that's a great question. I would love to do that in the next show. That'd be awesome.
All right, cool. We'll hang out after the show, guys, and we'll discuss that a little bit.
Yep.
If you are seeking any sage advice, rfistaff@gmail.com, 570-865-4210, the hotline.
You don't have Nick here to sing for you.
I know. Nick. And let's head into our first segment of the night.
Yeah, I remember back in the day, a fella knew how to judge a fireball on the fly and how far the cleric could push the undead he turned. I tell you, with all these min-maxers and munchkins, metagame and power game, there's something missing that I'm here to learn you. Now sit down and crack your book while I commence to teach you some.
Table manners.
So on today's Table Manners, we're going to talk about Pixies. Now, I'm not going to tell you why I'm going to talk about Pixies. That's between me and Vince, but we're going to talk about Pixies. Vince, I think it's because of short people, but that's okay. It's all good. Anyway, now, just for today and everything, well, maybe not just for today and everything, I'm going to get away from the buy-the-book mentality because, as we all know in first edition AD&D, Pixies are not a playable race for players. So in this case here today, we're going to talk about Pixies as a playable character race by players in a first edition game. Now, when I think about Pixies, some people will think about sprites. Is that how you say them? You call them sprites, right?
Yes.
That's what I call 'em, yeah.
I don't call them spritz. I hear some people call them spritz, and I think like that sounds kind of weird. But sprites, leprechauns, brownies. What are those other ones? There's some other ones out there. I can't even think what they're called. I don't want to say fairies. They're not really fairies because fairy is a very generalized term and everything.
Yeah. Brownies, sprites, pixies, dryads, but no, they're taller, but they're all...
Yeah, they're a little bigger. Dryads,
Yeah.
satyrs, and, those kind of people and everything. The fae folk, the green folk, as you might want to call and everything. Now, when I think about Pixies, and sometimes I mess this up and everything, I think about like Tinkerbell and Peter Pan, but I think she was a fairy, though.
Well, if you go by later editions, she's a pixie.
See, that's what I thought. But then when you think of Pixies, Pixies are normally bigger. Pixies are not that small.
Right.
And then I saw the movie Pan's Labyrinth, I believe it was.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where that hideous monster with the eyeballs in his hand was eating those little things that were flying around. Remember she went to that table and it woke up or something? And it grabbed one of them, ate them. I don't know what that thing was. Anyway, but those things right there reminded me of sprites because sprites are actually smaller. When I look at Pixies, and I looked them throughout various different editions of D&D, Pathfinder, I even looked in some supplemental material produced by other companies like Encyclopedia Divine, Fey Magic, and then the other one called Into the Green by Bastion Press. I see some, talk of Pixies, but Pixies in general are about 2.5 feet tall. That's how big they are. Now, in the Monster Manual, they're not covered as being 2.5 feet tall, but they're considered small.
Mm.
So, it says 2.5 feet tall there, but I'm talking about in the physical description below. That's what they say small is 2.5 feet tall. So I don't know if that is a tall pixie or if that is a medium-sized pixie for its, middle. Can you have a tall pixie of 3 feet tall, or can you have one that's 4 feet tall? That's a big pixie.
Why not?
Yeah.
No, really, it's your game. Why not?
Right.
Yeah,
Pixies with
true.
giganticism.
Or acromegaly, like Andre the Giant.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of stuff and everything. But yeah, so Pixies, can they be a playable race for players? Absolutely. I see no reason why they cannot be a player race. And basically, if anything, Pixies would make great fighters and they would make great thieves. I don't think they can really do too much else. But they're most of the round carrying around those little small bows and they carry swords. So I think that would be the two character classes they could pick on was fighters and thieves. I think they'd be great.
What if you wanted to throw in Unearth Arcana and make Pixie Barbarian Horde? Just imagine a horde of pixies. You just hear the buzzing of their wings in the distance, and they're just in giant it gets louder and louder, and this giant mass of barbarian pixies just destroying every town in their path.
I'm going to say this. I'm not going to take anything away from anyone's game. If they want to have a horde of barbarian pixies, go for it. I can tell you, I'd be running. That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pixies.
Well, I can honestly see pixies being druids, too.
And you know what? You're right, Vince. They can be druids, being that they're fae folk. So, yeah, definitely druids. And forgive me for, leaving the druid out. I love druids. And pixies would make perfect druids as well. So definitely thieves, fighters, and druids. Maybe not so much as thieves. Their alignment is neutral. So I guess they could be neutral, good in alignment. That would be another case there too. If a player does use a pixie as a playable race, alignments would have to adjust to. So then again, the typical alignment for a pixie is neutral. If it's played by a player, they would have to match the alignment of the character class they want to use. So yes, druid be perfect because they're neutral alignment anyways. That's generally what they are. Now, go ahead. No, go ahead, Vince.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Will we hinder some of the attributes, you think?
Oh, attributes? Well, I can tell you right now, being that they're small, they're going to have a natural armor class and everything. Now, depending on the DM, are they a magical race, or are they going to be just like a typical normal race that has, innate abilities like drow elves, for example? I don't consider drow elves a magical race.
No.
You see, I'm just a race with innate magical abilities, and I think we would have to treat the same with Pixies, that they're just a playable character race with innate abilities. And, I think they're allowed to dispel evil. Now, that's another thing that a DM has to take into consideration because, per the monster manual, they dispel evil at the 8th level of ability. That's extremely powerful. So I would say as a first level character, no matter whether it's a druid, a thief, or a fighter, it would start off at dispel, magic would be at first level ability. When they get to second, then it increases in power until a maximum 8th level. So they have dancing lights, they have ESP. I think that some of them do have that Otto's irresistible dance, which I think is hilarious. That's absolutely hilarious. I just could see that happen. I think it said 1 in 10, 1 in 8. It's 1 in 10.
1 in 10.
So
and then they're also normally invisible as well, too. So
now, see, that's interesting. I saw that in a lot of the supplements that Pixies in their natural state are typically invisible, and they can turn it off and turn it on. So now this might be a case where an ability like that might be lost because they chose to go this route of dealing with humankind and so on. So again, this is the thing with drow elves in the very beginning. All drow elves were typically assumed to be evil, so no one would ever ask to have a drow elf in a party in first edition.
Right.
It wasn't until Unearthed Arcana came out saying there are some good elves. So in this case here, I think there would have to be a sacrifice. So if you want to play a player character, and a Pixie is one of them, I think they would have to forfeit that right to that invisibility, because that could be a very overpowering, ability, innate ability for them. So again, it's up to a DM to adjudicate this kind of creature and any other creature of this size. Events, hint, hint, brownies, leprechauns, and so on. If you want to play these characters with these innate abilities.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was the same thing with drow elves, and people said like, "Wow, they have a lot of innate abilities." Yeah, they do have a lot of innate abilities, and they could be overpowering if you had multiple of them. But if you just have one in the party, it can't be that bad.
I would probably treat it like as if it was a classic D&D race class thing. I'd make it, since you said it's limited to like 3 different things. So I would say like a Pixie Fighter, it's its own class itself right there, Pixie Fighter.
And that's perfect. And
make up its own experience chart.
Yes, I think so too. Now, another key thing with Pixies is their magic resistance of 25%. No problem with giving it a 25% magic resistance in lieu of the invisibility. They lose the invisibility, but they keep the 25% magic resistance. Again, they are a magical being. I see some DMs out there say like, well, if you choose to, and this is a great example though. Remember when we was talking about dark elves and how their magical swords or their magical stuff and everything had to be exposed to that underground radiation, but once they got away from that radiation, they would lose it? The same thing can apply with Pixies and their special abilities. They have to remain in a certain area within a forest, so deep in there, so that they can attune themselves to that natural force of nature, which give them that innate ability, because they're given this ability to defend the forest or defend wherever they live at the woodlands. I mean, you can have jungle pixies and savanna pixies or desert pixies. They would look kind of funny looking, I think. Like little cactuses running around with little thorns sticking out or whatever. They live in arid conditions. It's just, part of the nature of living within that environment. Right. Once they leave that environment, though, they start losing those abilities. So, for example, the first thing that would go was invisibility. Now, magic resistance, on the other hand, you can say instead of giving them 25%, maybe 10%, and that's it. That's the minimum magic resistance they can have. Yeah. So, I mean, it's great. I think Pixies would be great. They're only 2.5 feet tall. How big are kobolds and goblins? They're about 2.5 feet tall, right? Maybe 3?
Yeah, I think 3 to 4.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, they're still small, though. So, again, like I said, great playable race. They're just a little smaller than normal. And they're definitely smaller than gnomes, that's for sure. So, and their ability to fly, though, they have the ability to fly. They would never lose that ability to fly.
No.
So that's an interesting. But just remember now, if pixies are in armor, depending on what kind of armor it is, that will limit their flying ability. So I don't see no pixies running around in full plate armor like a cavalier. And
Right. And plus, if you think that having a pixie be able to fly, it could unbalance your game, you could even say, yeah, they can fly, but they can only fly like 5 feet. So that way they can actually be eye level with all their taller companions. So as opposed to, well, I'm going to fly on top of this 20-foot cliff as opposed to climbing it.
Don't pixies have to rest after like an hour of straight flying?
That's a very interesting question, and that would be something in the DMG to look after how long someone flies if they have to rest, and that could be a great, penalty applied to the flying depending on how much weight they carry. And my thing on flying is, and I'm going to tell you straight right now, you want to fly, and that applies to anything. I don't care if it's a magic user or if it's a druid on a chariot of Sustar or whatever it's called and everything. If you're flying, you're putting yourself out to open to be attacked. If someone's got ranged weapons, there he goes. There's the druid. That's right. Come on out there and fly. And the same thing goes with pixies. Believe me, if I see a pixie, I'm shooting it with arrows. No, I really wouldn't be. That would be a bad person doing that, or a monster doing that to attack them and eat them and stuff. I mean, think about it. Look what ogres would do. If a pixie went into an ogre cave, the first thing you would see is all these little pixie fly traps that hanging up in the cave and have to catch pixies flying around. So yeah, they could set it all up and everything. Goblins would have nets. So got to be real careful about that flying. A good DM would do it right, depending on the foe they face. So now I wouldn't be flying. If I was playing a pixie character, I would only fly if it's absolutely necessary to. Absolutely necessary. Now, another ability they would lose is that ability to put enemies to sleep with that sleep arrow attack.
Yeah, we have to pull that, yeah.
Yeah, that would have to go too as well. That's just an innate ability that is given to a pixie if they're defending a forest. So again, if you leave the forest and not defend me anymore, I'm not giving you the ability to put people to sleep and everything. Because understand now, they're not hostile creatures. I only think they would be very hostile to people like, just like druids and dryads and sylphs and nereids and anything that deals with nature. They don't like intruders damaging their forest, the place where they live at. Basically, is what it all comes down to.
I've seen plenty of female characters come into the game. I want to play a pixie, so this is a perfect example.
That's I would have no problem with that. Now, what was that movie? I'm trying to think. Willow. That was what it was. Remember Willow?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not talking about those two morons that were dressed in those rat costumes. Those were brownies, I believe, right?
I think so.
They called them brownies. Those were knuckleheads. But now, remember when Willow met that lady that flew around the forest? What was it? Was she a fairy or was she like a pixie? Or remember her?
I don't remember, honestly.
Yeah, she was there talking to him and telling him that what he had to do with the baby. And you saw all the little things flying around, the little fireflies. I guess those were all little fairies or something. I don't know. They were little pixies. So I guess however you want to determine, what they are and everything. So again, they're protectors of the forest.
I know they did a thing with pixies or fairies on. I don't know if you ever watched the TV show Merlin.
Oh wow, I ain't seen that in a while.
Yeah, well, no, the newer one that came out of the BBC network.
Right.
They had a whole thing with the pixie or fairy was able to transform themselves into a human for a certain amount of time, and had to keep taking a dose of a potion to stay in human form. Otherwise, they would become a pixie all over again.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, because I saw that in the Peter Pan movie because that's what Tinkerbell did. She became like full-sized for him.
Yeah.
I don't know why she did that. Anyway, I guess he said, no, I don't like you. You're ugly or something. And then she got mad and she shrunk back down to her little size and everything. So it's just interesting and everything. But like I said, I was reading some supplements on them. And yeah, Pixies, definitely a playable character race. The DM has to adjudicate very carefully how it's going to overpower the game or actually underpower the game, because I can see disadvantages. And, I don't think Pixies would typically normally, go underground and mess around underneath there and everything further and further away from their woods. So, but yeah, I agree. I think that Pixies can be a playable character race. Good luck on that. Well, come on, let's think about it. I want to play a pixie. And I'm thinking, okay, Will, what are you doing?
Well,
No.
I wouldn't expect you of all people to be sitting down at my table saying, "I'm playing a Pixie tonight." So, Mr. Big Bad Marine playing a Pixie. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. That would seem kind of weird.
Yeah, it would, Will. I can keep playing a brownie. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, no. No. Actually, brownies are pretty cool and everything. They're kind of weird looking. I don't like them in the monster manual.
We'll save that for next week. No, I'm kidding.
Don't you dare. We already talked about something else we're going to do, so don't you dare give me another short person.
Okay.
Well, what about you, Matt? Would you allow Pixies?
Oh, absolutely. When it comes to races, I'm pretty lenient on letting players play anything. But yeah, just like we've discussed, I would tone down some of their innate magical abilities. The flying, I may even limit that some, just because I could see, this dungeon could have some floor traps. Just fly over it. So you just have to keep in mind that your players, you have one player that can fly over things, but I think I see nothing wrong with it. I mean, it could even make for some interesting stories. If you know a player wants to play a Pixie in advance, you could start tailoring a story around why is this Pixie roaming with this dwarf, elf, and human. So you could, I think it opens up some different story options. Or if you wanted to have a campaign of nothing but these like fey forest creatures, you could as well. So you could have your satyr with your pixie, with your dryad. They're all trying to defeat something that's causing harm to the forest. I mean,
yeah, that's a good example. This may be just a temporary character. This might be a long-term character. So that's a real good point right that you brought up, that this could be just a temporary character thing. You know, maybe the other character's stuck somewhere, they got to save him. So guess what? The character that's been removed from the game, guess what? You'll be playing a Pixie ally, and you'll play this character until your character comes back into the game. Yep, right. I like that. Good idea. Excellent.
And also another negative I was thinking about the Pixie, the bigger they are, the louder those wings are going to be when they flap.
Yeah, so that Pixie thief is going to have some issues if he decides to fly.
Right. Yeah, and like I said, Pixies, they have a lot of innate abilities, and it just, the DM has to adjudicate on that. The flying definitely it could be a plus or a negative, but again, give me those limitations, and then a Pixie would be a very playable character. And I meant to tell you about that Otto's Irresistible Dance. That's a nasty spell.
Yeah.
I can't recall what level it is right now, but doesn't the person just keep on dancing and can't stop?
They keep dancing till they collapse.
Oh, that's not good. That's no fun.
Oh, God. That just reminded me of Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode.
The musical episode.
Yes. The one musical episode when they kept dancing and they couldn't stop dancing until they died.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah. Because of one of those demons that kept... never mind. I won't get into that. Yes, I watched the show Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Laugh at me all you want.
No, it's okay. Buffy was good to go. I had no problem with it.
Yeah, we watched Angel too. Okay, let's go on to the next segment.
Go ahead.
Oh man, what the heck is that?
Stand aside, you fool! I have a spell that will work here!
What do you mean I can't hit with that? Oh, right, fine. Show it to me in the book.
Welcome to Game Mechanics.
Okay, we're sitting here in game mechanics. This week we're going to talk about some optional rules that are not actually rules in the game, but a lot of people tend to think about this when they think too much about armor class. We're going to talk a little bit about armor class and body parts. Now, I know you guys are probably maybe once or twice sitting there when you were playing a game thinking about, well, I'm wearing a chain shirt, but that doesn't really cover my legs. That doesn't really cover my head. What about my arms and legs? So we were talking about the armor covers less, so that leaves a worse armor class for different parts of the body. This is obviously you don't have to do this at all, but it's just a thought. So if the chain shirt covers you with an AC of, say, 6 for your top, what about your legs? What is the AC for your legs? It's obviously going to be less because you're not wearing chain on the bottom. You only have a chain shirt on. So you have to think from a monster perspective here, because if you're in a battle with another person, another PC, or another NPC, say like an elf or a human, more than likely they're attacking you in a somewhat traditional fashion way of hack slash, get the body, chop the head. You have to think monsters scraping and scratching are going nuts all over the place. So they'll tend to hit things like legs, shins, palms of hands, backs of necks, things like that. So I would think, as a DM, you would probably drop the armor class slightly down. Will, what would you think about doing that?
Let's see here. Let's talk about this for a second concerning armor class and body parts. Now, since we're talking about first edition AD&D, I know that there's a lot of people that heard of a game called Hornmaster. Hornmaster was an awesome fantasy medieval role-playing game, which this is what happened. If you put on chainmail, chainmail will protect, certain parts of your body. However, if you wanted to protect other parts of your body, such as your legs, your arms, your head, your neck, and your hands, you had to wear the appropriate pieces of gear. Now, right. As we all know, and I think that was an excellent system, one of the best systems out there ever when it came down to those kind of specifics. Let's be realistic. First edition AD&D is extremely abstract when it concerns armor. Now Hornmaster, like I said, if you put on a chain shirt, the chain shirt will give you an 10. And now understand that weapon's going to be different. Now watch this now.
Okay.
The chain shirt, say, gave you 5. Let's say you had another piece of armor. I said you have another piece of armor underneath the chain because you can't wear a chain shirt just on bare skin. So it gives you another piece of protection underneath it. So your total protection to your chest area was a 7. Or let's give it an 8. However, certain weapons, for example, like blunt, piercing, and slashing, would do certain amounts of damage versus certain types of armor. In this case here, the chain shirt with the little piece of leather underneath there gives you protection of 8. A great sword does 8 points of slashing damage, but does only 5 points of blunt damage if you use the flat of the sword, whatever. So depending on if you hit them will determine whether or not the damage penetrates that armor to the actual physical body part. So yeah, you'll have multiple places of armor on each body part, like your legs and your arms and your neck and everything. And unless that weapon can penetrate it, you won't take no damage. However, the armor itself gets damaged. And after so much damage, it begins to weaken. So then, the more damage you take, the less the armor will protect you, and then of course, then you'll take that damage physically to the actual body parts. And then if we get into damaging body parts, well, then we have to start looking at other systems where, well, if you take so much damage to this limb, how will it affect your mobility? How will it affect your defense? How will it affect your ability to attack people? And so on and so on.
Well,
no, go ahead.
Plus, based on your ability to move around and the armor you're wearing. So, if a body part, such as a leg, is chopped, for example, or wounded, that's going to make your armor class drop a bit.
Yes.
Yeah. It's
totally agree.
Common sense. You just think about the LARPing people out there. Every time you hit a body part, they drop it and they hop around. That makes you a lot easier to hit because you're hopping around.
Yes.
And you hop when they chop off both legs, they're on their knees on the ground, even though it looks kind of funny, but that's kind of it's their realistic way of dealing with the situation. You're a lot easier to hit doing like that. So
Right. And so, that's the big key thing is everything. So my advice is on people that really want to get into those kind of optional rules is look into alternate systems of how they use that armor and protecting certain parts of the body. Hornmaster would be the number one priority. The next one would be chivalry and sorcery. These are older games. They were around in first edition. They get into the second and third editions later on into the late 80s, and I think almost into the early 90s until there was no more left. So, but definitely great options on that. I like that because that actually, and of course, that would require probably a different type of character sheet because you're going to have to write down. And I think I posted one of those things on the OSR website, on the forum of what a character sheet looks like for a person that plays in Hornmaster wearing different types of armor and explaining how you damage this person. And then comes the critical hits, or not critical hits, but the called shots. I want to hit his arm. I want to hit his leg. I don't want to hit his chest. I want to hit his head. All that stuff applies.
Right, and I know people probably saying, well, why don't you just use the weapon versus armor class chart that's in the book? This is something a little bit different than that, so...
Yeah.
Right.
Screaming that out loud.
Right, it's more reminiscent of, like, Top Secret SI, where... on Top Secret SI, you actually had your little cartoon of a person, and you actually had hit points or hits you could take per body part, and every time you made an attack. Part of the role was determining where that attack would hit. So if you weren't specifically aiming for like the right hand, you would just roll to see what did you actually hit, because when you're swinging a sword, not everything's going to hit in the chest. Some may hit the shoulder, some may hit an arm. You may hit them in the head, or maybe the left knee. So if you're breaking it down into armor by specific location, you may want to, just for every attack, called or not, determine what body part was hit by this swing. Just to add that little extra bit of realism to it.
Right. Yep, I agree with that and everything. Yeah, I'll tell you, I like those kind of systems. They bring in that degree of realism and everything. But of course, bringing a system into a game, into first AD&D, with an abstract system, so it requires some changes as far as how much damage. Now, this is where weapon damage is set. So no matter, what weapon you use, it does a set amount of damage. The great sword will do 10 points regardless. So there is no more rolling for damage. Now, there is a critical hit and a critical fumble. Well, actually, let me change that. It's not a critical hit, but actually it's a critical success, a moderate success, a moderate failure, and a critical failure. And so usually on those the failures, you usually miss. Critical failures, well, it could be something bad. You could damage yourself in the process. And the critical successes and the moderate successes will tell you how much more damage you do to that person, how much of it might bypass that armor. You just might have hit a certain portion of armor where a little bit more of that damage gets through and hits the body. So, yeah, that's excellent. I think it's a great optional rule out there if you want to bring a little bit of realism into the game.
But I guess the question is, how far would you want to take it? In second edition, and one of the option books, they actually had all of those critical hit tables broken down by body part. So if you do have like a critical hit to like the left arm, do you want to have that be more like a permanent injury, as opposed to just you've taken hit point damage to this arm? Or do you want to, or if you took like a critical hit to like the stomach, do you want to say, well, you're going to be bleeding to death in 2 turns?
Pac-Man had a great chart for that too.
Yes. Yep, they sure did. And you know what? It's funny how you bring that up, because when you bring up Hackmaster or other games like Rollmaster, with oh my Lord. I mean, if you want to take it past armor and what kind of armor and weapons are hidden, you can do it with spells too. And now you will need a cleric in the game. I don't care what anyone says. If you don't have a cleric, you're done.
Right.
Yeah, because you have to, and then you can put in like, well, a cure light wounds will only cure superficial wounds, cuts, abrasions, maybe certain types of, slices and pierce depending on how much damage you took. But let's say it won't fix a broken bone. You'll need a cure, critical wounds, or a cure serious wounds that do more of the serious wounds. So again, all that stuff you have to take into consideration if you decide to add that little bit of realism that you're seeking.
Right. It's like the Deadlands system has that. They break it. They have like 5 different wound levels per body part.
Yeah.
So if you
yes.
So that way you can have, well, you've taken this much damage to your arm. That means you're this minus to hit. Oh, you've taken this much to your leg. You're this minus to your speed. And as you take more damage, those negatives become more and more, and it becomes harder and harder to heal them as well without magical means. Another good system that does that is Aces and Eights.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of the Western games actually break down damage by location, because when the early age of gunfighting, that was actually really important. but you could apply something like that to AD&D. The only thing you'll want to be careful about is you could end up bogging combat down a lot, especially if you start using the random hit location for every swing of a sword. So it's a matter of figuring out what that happy balance is between adding that little extra bit of realism, but not at the expense of a fun game experience. Because this is... AD&D, like we said, is an abstraction of combat. It's not a simulation. You can bring simulation into it, but if you try to make it too much of a simulation, the system just really doesn't hold up.
Yeah, we tried doing that in my former group. That every time you got hit, it was roll percentile and see where you got. It was just to a point. It was just like, enough.
Yeah, it becomes a game not like the first edition AD&D that we know. And this is why I say to people out there that if you're trying to bring this realism to first edition AD&D, you're going to have issues. There's going to be a lot of issues. And, why bog down a game that's already good enough as it is? Mm-hmm. If you really want to get into games that provide that type of realism and detail, and you don't care about time, Chivalry and Sorcery and Hornmaster are the top 2 recommendations I can tell you, because I'm telling you, those games do not mess around. And then, they add stamina to it, because guess what? If you are heavily armored and you are swinging a sword while you're carrying a shield, you're going to get fatigued. You're going to get tired. And that's why I like that whole stamina, stat in there. So after a while, you start getting tired. That sword is getting a little heavier and heavier. It's getting harder to hit people. And you're not moving around as much and everything, because a person in, plate mail armor, swinging a sword, carrying a shield, trying to defend himself from their opponent's attacks, it's just going to tire you out. And it all adds up at the very end.
Right.
Yeah,
and it's just like when we talked about the Wilderness Survival Guide with the temperature of what you're fighting, and that will affect you as well, so if you really wanted to get into the simulation of it. So between the fatigue of being in armor, then throw in the effects of the weather in that armor, while yes, it provides some protection, really isn't that effective at fighting for long periods of time. It's meant for short bursts. You're not going to have 30-minute quick blow-for-blow combats in armor.
Okay, cool. All right, tell us what you do out there. rfistaff@gmail.com. And we'll head into our next segment.
That is not dead, which can eternal life. And with strange eons, even death may die.
I welcome the unwary to the Creature Feature Theater.
The Creature Feature Theater this week. We have a monster called the Verbeeg. I've always pronounced it that way. Am I saying it wrong, guys?
I would say Verbeeg.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, Verbeeg. Anyway, if you turn to the Monster Manual 2 on page 69, basically these are gargantuan humans. They're almost giant-like. They're about 10 feet tall. And they're very intelligent, and they're neutral evil, generally, creatures, and they seem to be commanding hill giants around. And they're usually found where all giants are. I don't understand how they can command hill giants around. They're huge. So how can you think they can control a hill giant? They have superior strength. They usually throw spears, and you won't really find any females in the group. Maybe one or two, and usually they'll generally be the leader of the group with one additional male. Now, I was thinking about these creatures today. I was looking at them. They could be considered, if you look at them really quickly, they could be considered humans.
Yeah, and it actually in the description even talks about they have a humanoid appearance for the most part. I mean, unlike your ogres and your hill giants that are more deformed and out of proportion, these are more just 8-foot tall humans.
Yeah, they you could just look at them and go, oh my god, they're giant humans coming into town, but meanwhile they're not.
Right, and really I think the only reason they're leading the hill giants and the ogres is they're a little brighter. So they've got that average to very intelligence, which is more than you can say for your average ogre. So they become the kind of the de facto leader just by that alone. They can plan a little bit better than the rest of the people they're hanging around with. So by default, since they're the smartest one in the room, they get to be the leader.
I like this one example they have here at the end, that they're deformed a little bit, and they're also human hunters. So this could be like your typical like bounty hunter in the middle of the town. You go find him in the dark, seedy part of town, and you like Jimmy the Squarefoot or Jack and Iron. It was Jimmy the Squarefoot, and you're like, yeah, I got this problem with this guy named Will. I don't like him too much. Here's 100. Take care of him for me. And this guy, there goes no. We all love Will.
Well, guess what? That Verbeek better bring a whole bunch of hill giants and ogres with them.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's too funny.
How would you guys use this guy?
Well, Verbeek, this is interesting because I was just reading some Forgotten Realms novels, and someone was killing a whole band of them, but I just can't remember who it was. I read books for their entertainment purposes, then I forget about these guys, but I know that the Verbeek were allied with some other giants that I can't remember the whole thing on, or maybe it was ogres. But no, I would gladly use a Verbeek as the big bad evil guy, and you have to deal with his ogre and hill giant minions. Definitely, no problem at all.
You know what I can see this guy doing? A Verbeek coming into this large city, going to the leaders of the city, sitting down with them saying, listen, I want every month 1,000 gold handed to me without question, or I will unleash this giant, massive force of hill giants to crush your city. Kind of like the whole mob situation. And then the players come in or are hired secretly to go find where their headquarters are and take out this guy.
Oh, yeah.
Something like that.
Well, I like to, the thing about Verbeeks, they can be shamans, which is very interesting. Because, again, here you got a monster with a class, a character class. It's a shaman. So, again, you're dealing with a creature that is very diverse, and it just the uses for these monsters, especially this specific one, is funny. But the funny thing you said it, like you said, how can they be commanding hill giants? Yeah. Okay, hill giants are like over 10 feet tall. These things are between 8.5 to 10 feet tall. I'm thinking like hill giants take orders from a short guy, not happening.
Yeah. I never made sense to me, but
yeah, it just sounds like the Verbeek, they kind of are like the bullies. It's more like they'd like bully these bigger things into working for them, which the only reason I could think they can get away with is just due to their intelligence. They can pull off either traps or like lord over the other hill giants. Well, if you don't do this, I will use my magic shaman powers.
Right.
And
I think that hill giants have a low intelligence anyway, I believe.
Right, so all of a sudden, a little bit of magic could go a long way in convincing a hill giant, maybe I should follow them. They're not that much smaller than me. They're not like the puny humans.
Right, and I think the Verbeek leader, always has an 18-100 strength. That's kind of weird how they said that.
Yeah.
Always has an 18-100 strength. I'm thinking like, okay, so now we know that every time we run into a leader of these things, they have an 18-100 strength.
Right.
That's just funny how they mentioned that in there.
Right.
And like you said, the deformities, that's kind of weird how they said that, because then when you said deformities, Vince, I said to myself, hey, this almost sounds like they're kin to Fomorian giants.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who are hideously deformed all the time, no matter what.
Yeah. I could totally see in this as a PC possible class race thing.
Oh, yes, totally so, because I know they are in second edition, because I believe the Verbeek is one of the ones in the Monstrous Humanoid Handbook, or I can't remember the name of that brown
what was it? There's a book on like giants.
Yeah, something like that.
Monster Mythology, they were in that.
Well, I could see totally just
Giant Craft, that's the book I was thinking of.
Making them 8 foot tall and allowing them to play either a fighter type place class, or maybe even you could design a shaman type class, or make them a cleric type class or something, give them limited spells. And, and they'd have to remain a neutral alignment, because it does say neutral and then parentheses evil. So I guess some of them could be standard neutral alignment.
Yeah, I think what they mean by that, if I'm correct now, don't quote me on this, but I believe when it has the axis in the in parentheses, they're typically neutral in alignment, but they have evil tendencies.
Right.
I believe that's what that means.
Right.
Yeah, I usually take it that way too.
Yeah, that doesn't mean they're always neutral evil, because then like the Archlich, or I'm sorry, not the Arch, but Demilich is neutral evil, but it doesn't have that in parentheses. They are neutral evil.
No, they are evil. Trust me.
Yeah, no, I think Verbeeg are an interesting humanoid race. Again, and you're correct. I believe this is definitely a very PC playable character race. No problems. Just got to take into consideration, though, when the players choose this creature, make sure you kind of make them on the short side. Because what happens if the dungeon, the hallways are only 7 feet, 8 feet in height, and here you got a guy that's 10.5 feet tall.
Yeah.
There's gonna be problems.
And don't design them to be the big dumb guy too, because they're not dumb.
No.
That could
No,
just
they're
show
not.
someone playing this 8-foot guy walking around going, "Which way did he go, boss? Which way did he go?" That's not these creatures. These are intelligent creatures.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they say they're average to very intelligent, very intelligent. That's awesome. That speaks unto itself right there. Very intelligent. They're not dumb.
Okay.
They're ugly, but they're dumb. Not dumb.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're trackers. They hunt people down and kill them for sport and for fun. So
Yeah. So I think I'm just taking a look. Yeah, it's just amazing how they got these things set up though. But that's awesome. No. Verbeeg, good to go.
good to go. Next segment coming up next.
As the secret portal yields to your efforts, you stand amazed at a vision from the most fevered dreams of avarice. Before you lies the Dragon's Horde.
And now, in the Dragon's Horde, this is something that I can actually play off our discussion in issue 78 on creating plus magic weapons. We're going to talk about recharging magical items. Because in the DMG, it really doesn't go into how do you recharge that wand of magic missile? Is it even possible? I know myself, I've never really had any players try to recharge, but then again, my players also tend to, when they get a wand, staff, or rod, not use them. It's like they just keep saving it for that rainy day, but they never actually will use it. It's like, we must hoard this powerful magic item instead of using it. As I was going through, there was a couple articles in the Dragon that talked about this process, though. In Dragon 136, on page 46, in an arcane lore, it talks about this problem of recharging these magic items. Because magic items, as in the DMG, it takes a lot of work to make. So if you want to recharge it, it shouldn't quite be as strenuous and time-consuming and expensive, because you already have this masterwork item you're holding. And it should have, and it still has some magical power imbued in it, because if you use all the charges in a magic item, it disintegrates in your hands. So if you fully drain a rod, staff, or wand, it's gone. So there is no recharging something that you've expended all the magic power in. In this article, it actually brings up the use of a recharge spell.
Uh-huh.
And this spell, it talks about, it's a level 4 magic user or level 6 illusionist. And you would cast this spell, and what it does is it makes the wand receptive to having spells cast on it without damaging it. So if you have a wand of fire, you can then start casting fireball on it to recharge it. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't actually be fireballing the rod or yourself, because part of the requirements for this recharge spell is you have to be holding the item. So you would then cast your spells and it recharges. But there's a little catch. It's not just as simple as, okay, I have this wand. It has has up to 10 charge spots. I'm going to cast my spells. Because it actually talks about, with the charges, you don't know exactly how many charges are left when you go to recharge your spell, your wand. Because it says whenever you go to recharge, you roll a d6. On a roll of 1 or 2, the caster believes the actual number of charges is actually 1 to 4 below, On a roll 3 or 4, he knows the exact number of charges on the wand. But 5 or 6, he actually thinks there's 1 to 4 more charges available than there actually is. Because if you try to overcharge a wand, what happens? That spell actually takes effect on the wand, or in the case of the Staff of Power. Yes.
Oh,
so if you overcharge a Staff of Power, it explodes in the same manner as a retributive strike was made by that staff.
Boom!
Yes. So, much like magic creation, recharging isn't an exact science.
We did it. The group I was in formerly, his answer to everything was always gnomes. Go to a gnome, they'll know how to do it. Find a gnome, they'll know how to do it.
Right.
Now, with Joe, with my friend Joe, the DM, he always never told us. Like, you always would be able to find a magic user that would do it for you, but he would never tell you how many more charges you got, and the prices were always randomly different. But they were high-level magic users.
Right. Yeah. That would be a good way to keep the economy in your game under control, too.
Yeah.
That's another place a party's money has to go if they want to keep recharging these magic items.
Yeah, because I've never actually seen an official. I mean, I'm sure Gary has mentioned it somewhere in one of the thousands of threads somewhere out on the internet, but I don't consider that, like, canon rules. I mean, even if he says it, doesn't mean it's canon.
Right. Yeah, because really there is no official rules in any of the hardback books for recharging magic items, because I don't think it was intended to be done.
Yeah, like, for example, Will, in his whole how Will does combat is a lot different than most people do combat for first edition, because he's reading it as written.
Yeah.
Right.
When truly it's not written that way exactly, but we'll get into that.
Yeah, that's funny. We're going to start that again.
I started doing it and I was like, never mind. Anyway, so, charging your magical items, tell us how you do it out there, rfistaff@gmail.com.
Oh, I got something to say.
Oh, you do?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Tell us. I didn't know you had some.
I know a magical item you can charge up anytime you want, provided you have the spells. Remember the Ring of Spell storing?
Yeah.
Yep. See, now that's an item that's specifically designed, to store spells, that when you get rid of the spell, in order to get that spell back in there, I believe you have to cast the same exact spell back into that Ring of Spell storing that specifically stores those specific spells.
You said that 10 times fast?
I was doing that on purpose anyway. But no. As a matter of fact, as I remember back in the days, I agree with you, Vince, that there is there's nothing out there specific. It's not canon, and I do exactly just what Matt said right there is. I don't know exactly, and that's how my plays go. You don't know how many charges it actually has, and if they use that last charge, the item disintegrates. It's useless. You can't charge them.
So there you go.
Yeah, I mean, actually, just thinking, you could even, if you wanted to do something, think of like the Green Lantern, the Green Lantern power ring. That has to be inserted into the lantern and recharged. So that's another way you could do it. Yeah, you have this wand, but you have to take it to this certain spot and let it sit for however long to get it to recharge. But if you completely deplete it, guess what? It goes away. So perhaps you could just tie it to a specific location instead. So yeah,
I just give it to Vince.
What's that?
Give it to Vince so he can take to those gnomes.
Yes.
La, la, la. Oh, that's... No, like my friend always, every time when we're charging, remember, we gotta go find a gnome.
That's hilarious.
No, it's like you go find a gnome. It's like he put it in one of those machines and they'll fix it for you. It's like, okay, gnomes have these magical machines. Okay.
Then you come across a gnome that it's like, but all I do is cook. I don't know. I'm the cook. You're a gnome. You can fix magic items, but no. Just because I'm a gnome doesn't mean I can fix everything.
That's too funny.
All right, tell us what you do, rfistaff@gmail.com. I guess that's going to wrap up the show this week. I just want to remind a few people out there, because I've heard a few comments about this. By no means at all do we claim to be experts of First Edition or the leading authority of First Edition. There are no leading authority. If anything, Frank Menser, maybe Tim Kask, those guys would be your leading authority. Not us. We're just someone, we come here, we love the game. We like to throw ideas out there for people to listen. And if we walk away with someone saying, hey, that was a cool thing that Matt brought up. Maybe I'll use that in my game. Then we win right there. I'm just, I want to throw that out there because some people were saying, well, they think they're the leading authority. We're not at all. Not at all.
No. I know at no time will I ever tell people that I'm the leading authority on first edition AD&D, even though my experience goes back, 30 plus years. I just, hey, it is what it is. I don't know it all.
And obviously the podcast is done how we want it done. I mean, it's not everybody's going to like the style that we do it in. Not everybody's going to like everybody on the show. You like who you like. If you have a problem, start your own podcast. We have no problem with that. No. Right, guys?
No. And heck, if it's good, we probably will even mention it on the show. Because anything that actually just makes the OSR community better, we're for. We want people to play games and have fun. And if you're playing your game, you're having fun, and you're bringing in more people to the games, great. It's not like if there was another first edition podcast that you can only listen to one. You can listen to both. Everyone can get along, because we all have a certain take and style of show we put together. And if someone wanted to go and put together something that was more strict by the book or focused specifically on third parties or a million different other takes that you could go, more power to you. Do it. Please do it, because there's always room for more content on this topic.
Yeah, plus we get to listen.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's good too. Like I said, my whole point on doing this and me going to gaming conventions and all that stuff and everything is to promote gaming as a whole, because we all know where it's all going to and everything, but promote gaming. And you know what? I will never be exclusive. I'm very inclusive. And you know what? And even it's funny to say that, at Gary Con, Gary's son even made it plain and clear that Gary was never exclusive. He was always inclusive of other games. Yeah. So, be inclusive. Don't cut everyone out.
Exactly. All right, so let's see. What was that new catchphrase that someone said in the forums? Keep it original, play with rocks and dirt, everything else is fluff.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
I thought they said, who needed Will Wheaton when you have Will Cohen?
That's your catchphrase. We don't have,
okay.
We don't have Will Wheaton, we have Will Cohen. I think it was Rotten made it up. He said, keep it original, play with rocks and dirt, everything else is just fluff.
That's funny. Rocks.
Roll for initiative.